you spoke to me and said that, you know what, Bijay, you just got into podcasting. Guess what? In 3 years from now, Amitabh Bachchan is going to be doing the podcast. Then I would say, no, Sid, you are crazy. Like, what are you even talking about? I can literally count the number of people who are creating podcasts in India right now. Even if I want to do a professional podcast, it's just a microphone connected to my laptop, and that's all. I don't need ring light. I don't need camera. I don't need a super editing skill, unlike video. So all of this is telling us that, podcast is going to, get mainstream in next few years. First off, I would say that if your primary objective of starting a podcast is to monetize, please don't do. Listen to what Sid says, about selling the course. You are going to make money, not by starting a podcast, right? So you are going to get disappointed. Having said that, does that mean that you are never going to make money on the podcast? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that
Hey guys, Sid's here, and going to be doing this exclusive interview with somebody who had interviewed me in his podcast. He is one of India's leading podcasters who has had over 1 million downloads on his podcast, and that's huge, to get 1 million downloads. He has been in the game of podcasting for the last 4 years, and he's also interviewed people, big names like Hector Garcia, billionaire Naveen Jain, the person who's written the book called Hooked, Nir Eyal, and Vidya walks in. There are many other celebrities that he's actually interviewed on his podcast, and he's one of India's leading podcasters. So it's an honor and privilege to have with me here, and all of you can just type awesome if you're watching this on YouTube. Bijay Gautam, India's leading podcaster. Bijay, great to have you on this segment and in this show here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sid. And, it's my pleasure to be here speaking with you. And it's always interesting to have, to flip the roles. So
that's what I was going to say. You're always on this side of the table. Now you're on the other side, which is where I want to actually extract the value from you in terms of, what was your podcasting journey like? And, I have a whole bunch of questions that I have to ask you, because a lot of people, they're now, especially in my community, they're starting on the journey of podcasting and getting on videos and building their influence and their brand online. But this one topic, more than them, I'm looking forward to learning from you on what is happening in the podcasting world and what we should avoid, what mistakes we need to avoid if we have to really be successful in this game. And it's very different from the video world. It's different from Instagram, where everything is, very short. We are looking at long form here and more deep level stuff. So I want to start with the first question is, what got you into podcasting in the first place?
Yeah. So, Sid, back in 2017, I, worked as a research scientist. I come from a pharmaceutical background. I studied pharmacy and then, got this placement at the top pharmaceutical company. And within the first year of that job, I got promoted, and I had the vision of, hey, you know what, someday I'm going to be the head of research and development of this organization, like the young kids who just joined the organization have this big dream. And I had that as well. And first 1.5 years into that job, I realized, hey, you know what, this is not what I want to do with my life, because I was bound within that lab playing with the glasswares and chemicals. And I realized this is not what I want to, because I'm more of a person who want to be seen, who want to be, among people. And somewhere, I started feeling that, and I was getting more and more frustrated with the job. But luckily for me, I was exposed to this completely other side of the world. And because you do a lot of this stuff with Success Gyan, I remember when I was at the, second year of my college, 2014, second or third year of my college in 2014, I got a call from Success Gyan saying that, hey, you said that you want to, you applied for the scholarship for the National Achiever Conference that's going to happen here in Delhi. I jumped in, and, so I was exposed to this whole personal development space. I was reading a lot of books, attending these conferences, watching TED Talks. So I knew that there are these interesting people who are doing amazing things, the people who are sort of going the path which has never been explored.
Yes.
And these people seem to have figured out what they wanted to do in their life. And the whole idea was, I want to learn from these people and maybe in those conversations, I might find a blueprint which I can, replicate in my own life and find what I want to do next in my life. And so the initial idea, to be honest, was to start a YouTube channel and do a video and stuff like that. And then
Yes.
I realized there was a lot of, one, obviously you need fancy equipment if you want to do a conversation and, physical show. And, it required a lot of, equipment, and it required a lot of time. So, and that's when, I come across this medium called podcasting. And then I realized that in 2012, like 5 years back, I used to go to Robin Sharma's website and then download these audio clips when I was in college, when I needed to motivate myself to study well.
Nice.
I would download those audio file on my, small Java Samsung phone. And I realized, oh my God, I used to listen to these audios. Those are called podcasts. Oh, it sounds interesting. And then, when I got, uh, exposed to this world, I started researching more about this. And that's when I realized, hey, you know what, this is what I want to do. And I started having conversations with people, and the more and more conversations that I was having with these people, it started changing the way I would think. It completely changed my perspective about the world, because here I was during the day at my office, surrounded by the people, like in the most of the corporates where people often complain about the job, and I was here complaining about the food in cafeteria, complaining about my boss and complaining and being part of that ecosystem. And during the night and weekend, here I'm talking with the shakers and movers, the people who would say that, hey, you know what, I want to make impact in the world by
Yes.
building this company, by creating this product. Hey, you know what, I have left everything and now all I want to do is climb mountains, and I'm a mountaineer. And that got me into thinking, and that changed my own perspective. And when I was doing that, also it started resonating with the people who listened to the podcast. So it felt like, hey, you know what, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, because this is so much fun. I get to learn every single conversation. There's so much I can learn from. And and honestly said, when I look at it back, when look back at it today, and even today, it's more of me trying to scratch my own back. Like if I
Yes.
want to learn about the digital products and online, how do I sell my courses and stuff like that, I'm going to get Sid on my podcast and ask all the questions that I have, and make him answer the questions. If I want to learn about entrepreneurship, then I'm going to get Rajiv on the podcast and make him answer. If I want to learn about meditation, for instance, I use this app called Insight Timer to meditate. And one of the favorite teachers on that app of mine is David G. So I wrote an email saying that, David J, I love doing your meditation. I want to bring you on my podcast. So I think it's more of, me trying to scratch my own itch, and a lot of people find it relevant, because those are the questions, they have on their head as well. So, yeah, I mean, that's how I
Amazing.
sort of got into podcasting.
Great. What a journey. I mean, it's like it really shows that you were able to identify what media that you really wanted. Like you, even though you said, okay, YouTube, you want to start to that, but then you decide, okay, you're going to go with this media because you are tuning more with Robin Sharma. You preferred audio, and it's more hassle free than having all the gear and everything else and getting straight into it, and over 1 million downloads, which is like brilliant. So tell us about the next question that I have in my mind is, what's the potential of this industry in India specifically? I know globally it is big. We are looking at the Tim Ferrisses and all these big John Lee Dumas and going gaga over it. But what is happening in India? Can you share some numbers? Do you have some data there?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have numbers, Sid. And 2017 is when I started my podcast. And if in 2017, Sid, you spoke to me and said that, you know what, Bijay, you just got into podcasting. Guess what?
Mm.
In 3 years from now, Amitabh Bachchan is going to be doing the podcast. Then I would say, no, Sid, you are crazy. Like, what are you even talking about? I can literally count the number of people
Yes.
who are creating podcasts in India right now. And this was
Mm.
2017. And fast forward to 2019, I think it was in 2019 or late 2019 or early 2020, Amitabh Bachchan, did a podcast. So the point is this. Now, today, I'm sure every single person who is, watching us or listening to us know that the music app that they have on their phone, doesn't matter whether it's Spotify or JioSaavn or Ghana or Wink, take any of the music streaming platforms, they are pushing podcast heavily. We
Yes.
have started seeing hoarding boards promoting podcast. We have started seeing Bollywood getting into podcast. We have recently the guy who did this scam 1992, Pratik Gandhi, doing a podcast with Spotify. We have seen stand-up comedians getting into podcasting, including Zakir Khan, Kenny Sebastian, and so on and so forth. And guess what? YouTubers are getting into podcasting. Now, Instagram influencers are getting into podcasting. Why? Because they have realized if you want to get someone's attention, video is a great medium. But if you want
Yes.
to retain someone else's audience, someone's attention, it's very difficult for you to do that in a video because there's a lot of noise, that's a lot of clutter. And also the other thing that I often tell people is, Sid, if I asked you, I mean, you are exception because you are very conscious of how you consume the content on internet. But generally, like if we talk about people, if I normally ask people like, think about the last 10 videos that you have watched. Out of the last 10 videos that you have watched, how many of those videos were served to you by AI or served to you by the algorithm of these platforms where you did not have the intention to watch that video, but
Yes.
it just popped up on your feed and you ended up watching it. Now today 80% of the video consumption happens which is served by the algorithms, and only 20% of the video that normal
Wow.
people watch is intentional. What do I mean by intentional is, let's say you want to learn about podcasting, you went on YouTube and said that what is a podcast, that's intentional. You have had an intent, right? You want to learn about digital marketing and products and stuff like that, you went on Sid's a course platform and you learned that course, that's an intentional video consumption. And podcast, it's a reverse. 80% of people opt in to listen to podcasts, and the algorithm served like out of nowhere this podcast sort of popped in my feed is very, very low, and that also sort of increases the engagement. Now coming back to the numbers, as you said, that in the US there are over 200 million podcast listeners every month. In India, there was in 2018 PwC did a report where they said that there were 40 million podcast listeners in 2018, which was up 57% from the past year. And the same report predicted that there are going to be almost 200 million, 176 million podcast listeners by 2023. But this was a report that was published in 2019. But guess what?
Okay.
Here's what my hunch is. My hunch is we are going to be easily at 200 million podcast listeners by the end of this year. And why do I say that? Why do I say that we are going to be at 200 million podcast listeners by the end of 2022? Is because one, as I is different media houses are getting into podcasting, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, JioSaavn, Ghana. They are in this battle to win the podcasting game, and they are like crazily investing a lot of money in promoting podcast as a medium. If you really think about this, if you go on a Spotify and JioSaavn, at the end of the day, the music they are going to play is not going to be different. What's going to be different is the audio shows that so that's why they're investing a lot in going into the Netflix model, where they're commissioning a lot of new shows, putting on money to create original so that audience come and stick and be in the platforms. The second thing that I said was top creators, Bollywood celebrities, media houses. Like you think about media houses like the Quint, they started their podcast. Hindustan Times, they started their podcast. Where they just focus on creating original podcast content. You think about radio stations now, Radio Mirchi, Red FM. They have started their podcast division, the content that is not played on radio but just meant for podcast. They have started doing that, and all of this is increasing the awareness. And the other thing is regional content. This is going to be the year where the regional language content podcast space is going to explode, because
Amazing.
A lot of people, like for example, I took the example of Ghana and JioSaavn. Ghana has got more than 100 million people who have downloaded that app on their phone. Now think about this: 100 million people are exposed to this medium called podcast, and Ghana and JioSaavn and Wink, all of these platforms have very deep penetration in tier 2, 3 part of the country. And now when these people see this new icon on their music listening app, Ghana, oh, I see this. What is this thing called podcast? Let me explore this. And oh, I listen to, Bangla music. Can I find some Bangla podcast? Hey, I listen to, Tamil song. Can I find some Tamil podcast? Because I don't understand English. I don't understand Hindi, but I can understand Tamil, right? So they are going to find this sort of content. And what that means is the creators who are going to create the regional content and who are going to do a good job of it, they are going to have a huge early mover advantage. And also that, that space is exploding like big time. And last but not least, podcast has the lowest entry barrier. because
Amazing.
all I need literally to start a podcast, if I want, even if I want to do a professional podcast, it's just a microphone connected to my laptop, and that's all. I don't need ring light, I don't need camera, I don't need a super editing skill, unlike video. So all of this is telling us that podcast is going to get mainstream in next few years. Spotify released a report last year where they said that there has been 1100% growth in Hindi podcast in 1 year. 1100% growth. So that's
Amazing.
massive, right? So, and India is the third largest podcasting market today in the world. So all of this is telling us that it's not going anywhere. It's going to get better and better from here. So that's really exciting.
Amazing, Bijay. I'm totally with you on that. Even when I do my hackathon, I tell everyone to open up their Anchor accounts and just start. And
Yeah.
many of them have, in last hackathon, I think we had more than 1,000 people who launched their podcast in that 1 week, and it's going crazy. So superb. So if we're looking at a 200 million download, potential by end of this year itself, and it's just going to grow from what I can see. A low entry barrier and regional, that's like a totally different game altogether that will open up, because everybody's doing regional content on YouTube, but I think this is an untapped market now. Now it's going to start booming, like you said. So next question is, what's the best way to launch? Somebody who's actually watching this, they are not started their podcast, they're brand new. According to you, what do you think they should do to launch? Any tips from you on that?
Yeah. So Sid, whenever somebody wants to start a podcast, one thing, as you said, right? So and this is something that I always tell people, like, hey, if you want to start a podcast, if you just want to start a podcast for the heck of it, where you can go on your Instagram and LinkedIn bio and update that, hey, I'm a podcaster as well. All cool. You can also test waters using the tools like Anchor that you mentioned. Download an Anchor on your phone, record it, and then just test waters, and go and update your LinkedIn or Instagram by saying, I'm a podcaster as well. But if you want to really tap into podcasts as a medium and leverage it, and align that with the vision that you have, because it has immense potential right now. So for that, what I normally tell people, and this is something that you focus a lot on your teaching as well, you need to have clarity of three things, where you need to have absolute clarity of these three things before even you think about anything about podcasting. The first one is, why do you want to do it, right? That's the most important question that you need to answer. Why do you want to start a podcast? And this is something, for Sid, for you and me to be consistent in anything in our life. For us to become successful in any life, we need to be consistent. And that consistency comes from having the clarity of why we are doing it. And it's not different for the podcast as well, right? So you need to have absolute clarity of why do you want to do it. Is it because you want to build your personal brand? Is it because you have this, very powerful message that's really, really wanting to come out, and you want to share it with the world? Or is it because you want to maximize the reach of a business? Or is it because you want to network with these people? When you interview someone, you get to network with these people, build that relationship with them, right? So the classic example is what we are doing right now. I reached out to you saying, that's it, I want to have you on my podcast, and boom. And then we started building the friendship, and you said, like, Bijay, come on here and, share more about this, right? So I think, this is how you get access to people whom otherwise you would not have, access to, right? If I reached out randomly to Sid saying that, hey, Sid, I want to come on and talk to your community, then he would be like, who's this guy, right? But I said, hey, I want to add value first. I want to bring you on my podcast. I want to share you. And then so this is one example, right? So, and this is something that I do over and over again. So first, have a clarity of why do you want to do it? Because here's another interesting stat that you would be, surprised to know. There are almost more than 2 million podcasts globally. Out of 2 million, guess what? Only 36% of that 2 million podcasters have released more than 10 episodes.
Wow.
Think about that. 1/3. And if you ask me, Bijay, out of those 36% people who have released more than 10 episodes, how many do you think have released at least one episode in the past 3 months? That number will come down even further. That would be somewhere around 3 to 4 lakh only. Out of 20 lakh people who started podcasts, only 3 to 4 lakh people are consistently putting it out there. And the reason for that is simple, because you didn't have enough motivation to continue it. And why is it that you didn't have enough motivation? Is because you didn't have the clarity of why you want to do it in the first place. That's the first one. The second one that you need to have absolute clarity of is who your audience is. because when you understand who your audience is, you will be able to better serve them. And if you are able to better serve them, then only you will be able to eventually convert them into customers down the line. Like if you are, and I'm assuming a lot of people who are going to be listening to us or watching are the people who are going to be course creator or digital products creator. If you
Yes.
want people to buy your product or service, then you need to first, even if you are in the process of like creating the product and service, that emerges from understanding the pain point and problems, right? So, and if you have the clarity of the pain point and problem of your audience, then you are going to create the content that's going to serve the audience, and that's going to help them solve their problems. And if once they solve that, once you're solving that problem, then they are going to come back over and over again, and they are going to listen. And when they listen to you, imagine 30 minutes every single week. When somebody listen to you, imagine the amount of bond that you're going to form with that person. Imagine the level of trust that person is going to have on you, right? Imagine, and it so happens that in 2019 I was in Chennai speaking at an event, and this one random guy just walked up to me, and he looked so he approached to me thinking that he have known me for years. I don't know this person. He just walked up to me as if he was very familiar to me, and he comes to me and says, "You are Bijay, right?" I said, "Yeah, I mean, um, I don't think I know you." He said, "Oh yeah, you don't know me, but I listened to your podcast. I've been listening to this for the past 2 years, and
Nice.
it inspires me a lot." And what that told me was, this person feels that he knows me, he knows my sense of humor, he knows my personality, because he has been listening to me for the long enough time. And that bond, when you are able to create that kind of trust among your audience, then they want to buy from you as compared to anyone else, right? So audience, that's the second thing that you need to have absolute clarity of. Third thing that you need to have clarity of is your niche. And this is something that is going to help you differentiate yourself from all the other shows that are out there. Then how you are going to differentiate your podcast? Like, what is that unique element that you are bringing on the podcast? Like, if there are so many podcasts already on the topic that you want to create a podcast on, then what is that unique thing that you're going to bring on the table, where people are like, hey, you know what, this is the podcast that I want to listen as compared to all the other shows. So find that blue ocean for yourself, untapped market. It could be using the different language, where people are not doing podcast on, let's say, parenting in Tamil, and I want to do a parenting podcast in Tamil. Or maybe I want to do a podcast about digital marketing in Gujarati, or maybe I want to do a love and relationship podcast in whatever language that you want to do. So maybe that could be the thing. Or maybe you want to go a little deeper into the niche, right? And this is something that you talk about, and I know that people who are listening to us know about what I'm talking about, because this is something that Sid hammers over and over again on finding the niche and being clear on who your audience is. So I think these are the three things that you need to have absolute clarity on. And once you have that clarity, then you are doing it because you are equally passionate, you are equally excited about this. You are not just doing it because you want to just tap into this one extra medium. So yep.
Awesome, Bijay. Just to recap, this is amazing. So know the why, because if your why is strong, then only you'll be consistent in it, and talking about like a personal branding, your message, and stuff like that. And there are other benefits of it, like Bijay mentioned, is you can build your network by having conversations. And we would not be having this conversation unless he had invited me to his podcast. I got to know him better. So it is a beautiful way to open up new doors. Other reason is the audience, and the third one is the niche, and in fact going micro so that it has a blue ocean. So next question is Bijay, about formats. Like, tell us about what should be the ideal duration of podcasts, solo versus interviews, live versus recorded. Now we have like people doing what is this Clubhouse and now Twitter Spaces. Like, what do you? So let's get into format, and tell us about what do you see, where you see things going.
Yeah. So when it comes to format, I want to address first the live versus recorded podcast formats, right? So Sid, we always had radio, which is a live content medium.
Yeah.
But we have a podcast, which is on-demand content piece.
Mm-hmm.
And we have television, which is a live thing. And we have Netflix, which is on-demand, right? So if you compare like live versus, on-demand, it's always on-demand, because I want to listen to it on my time. Okay. If you're
Mm.
saying that, I have to come at 9 p.m. every evening, or maybe, once a week on a Tuesday, 9 p.m. to listen to you on a clubhouse, then, I might not be as committed to, show up
Correct.
every Tuesday. Sometimes life happens. And,
Mm.
but if you are saying that, okay, you can listen to it whenever you have your time, then come and listen to it. Right. So that's one aspect. And, I love Clubhouse, and I
Mm.
love Clubhouse as a medium to engage with your listeners, to just do a casual hangout with your listeners, then actually delivering the content. And I'll tell you why. I'm sure you have been to a lot of Clubhouse sessions. If you
Yes.
just go to the Clubhouse session, what happens on that 1 hour of conversation? You are just waiting for that one piece of insight or wisdom to drop in, which is
Mm.
because most of the Clubhouse sessions, they are not very well structured, and there's a lot of fluff there. I'm not saying
Exactly.
this is a great medium, but
Mm.
for you to find those few pieces of nugget, you have to spend an hour of time.
R.
And
Yes.
oftentimes people think about that, hey, what is the return of investment of the time that I'm going to put in? If I'm putting in 1 hour, if I'm just getting 2 nuggets of wisdom, then I don't think I'm going to come back here next week, right?
Mm.
So but on the other hand, podcasts usually are very well structured, and the host exactly know what is it that they want to ask. And
Yes.
even if there is a lot of fluff in there,
Mm.
then a lot of it is going to removed during the editing, so that audience get the actual insight. So
Mm.
I often use this term, because we produce a lot of podcasts as well, and we do a lot of work with the clients as well. And this is the term that we usually use is value per minute, or VPM. What is
Okay.
the value per minute that you are giving to your audience? Every
Mm.
single minute when somebody is spending on, every single minute somebody spends listening to your podcast, what
Yes.
is the value that they are going to get in return? And
Mm.
oftentimes, I ask our editors to be, and this is like a very simple yet very, very powerful hack that I personally use is: be generous when you are recording, and
Mm.
be ruthless when you are editing. So whenever you are recording, record as much you want, because you never know what is the kind of insight that you might get. But when you
Mm.
are on that editing table, be ruthless in removing the stuff, because your guest said, share, spoke for 2 hours. You don't have to release 2 hours, you can release just 20 minutes, right? So
Mm.
so that your audience get that VPM, high value per minute, right? So
Mm.
that's about the live and
Makes sense.
thing. So if I want to interact with my listeners, because podcast is a one-way medium, I would invite them on a clubhouse. Hey guys, if you want to hang out with me, then come every Tuesday evening. I was just going to hang out. I'm going to know you. You are going to know me. So, let's do that on Clubhouse to engage with your audience. But if you want to deliver the content, it has to be something, that I can listen to it on my time, right? Now, when it comes to the length of the podcast, again, there is no right or wrong, because, as I said, we produced podcast as short as 5 to 7 minutes, where, we produced a podcast around Bhagavad Gita, and we called that podcast Practically Gita, where it's
Okay.
nothing religious. It's not a religious show, but we took insights from Bhagavad Gita, which people can implement on their real life. And we did a 7-minute show where we would pick one verse from that text, and then simplify it for people to listen to it on their, and implement those ideas on a daily life. That worked like anything for us. And, I do my own show where, I get on conversation with people sometimes for 45 minutes, sometimes for 90 minutes, right? But as long as I'm giving value to people for 90 minutes, they don't mind sitting down and listening to it for 90 minutes. Even if they are not able to listen to it in one sitting, most of these apps, the way podcast apps function is, if I'm listening to the podcast, and let's say if I have to go on a 30-minute drive to my work today, I'm going to hit that play button. I'm going to listen to that 30-minute on the way to my office. I'm going to hit that pause button, close the app, and go to my work. And next time I open the podcast app, it's going to resume from where I left off. So, people are completing, the podcast, even if it's longer one, in multiple sitting, if it is providing value. So I think the answer to what should be the length of my podcast would be, as long as you are providing high value per minute, you can keep whatever the length of the podcast that you want to keep. There is one of the
Awesome.
very popular history podcast called Hardcore History, done by Dan Carlin. That guy releases 2 to 3 episodes a year. And each of these episodes are 4 to 6 hours long. And that is one of the most downloaded podcasts in the world. So
Wow. Wow.
as long as you are giving value, and it's phenomenal, it's just amazing. But again, as long as you're providing value and people find value in what you're sharing, you can keep whatever length that you want to do. And when it
Awesome.
comes to frequency, how frequently should you release to the podcast? Again, there is no right or wrong answer, but the ideal would be weekly. And also it depends on a length, right? If you are doing anything which is very short, 5 to 7 minutes, or less than 10 minutes, you can do multiple times a week, maybe 2 to 3 times a week, because 10 minutes is something that you can listen just in the snap of, like real quick. Even if you're
Yes.
releasing 10-minute 3 episodes a week, then that's just like a 30-minute of sitting. They can binge the entire week's content in that 30-minute. But if you're doing a longer, like 1 hour or 1.5 hour, that means for somebody to consume that 1.5 hour content, it's going to take 3 sitting, which means they have to, which means then you can't, if you release, right, 3 episodes a week, each of them 90 minutes, then people are always gonna, they are just gonna go crazy. Like, that's a lot of content for me to consume in the entire week. So you want to, give them that gap to sort of complete that thing. And then, you can do a weekly. So, or if you think, and also it depends on time that you have, right? So a lot of people are doing a lot of other things and you want to do podcast on top of it. So think about how much time that you have to dedicate for the podcast and do a back calculation. So usually it takes 5 to 7x the length of the podcast. So if you are looking at doing, 10-minute long podcast, it usually takes 50 to 70 minutes for you to put everything together, right? From, just maybe outlining it and just recording it, editing it, and publishing it. Now do a back calculation. How, divide the amount of time that you have. If you have like 10 hours every week to dedicate for a podcast, divide that by 5. Then, that means essentially, you can create 2-hour long podcast, 2 hour of content, but you don't want to create 2 hours, then maybe you can do a 30-minute long podcast. So I would say, just do your maths, see what works for you. But I would say don't go anything less than twice a month, because then that's, it's a too much of a gap between episodes. Yes. Like waiting for something for a month, then it has to be really good for me to just wait for something to, come up once a month, right? So 15 days, it's still okay. But if you're doing once a month, then it has to be like phenomenal. I don't mind waiting for another season of of my favorite series, because it was so damn good, right? So yeah.
Amazing. And when it comes to solo versus interviews, what is your take on that? Yeah.
Both of them works. And, the way I see solo versus interview podcast is from the outcome perspective, right? When you are doing a solo podcast, what happens is audience see you as an expert. They see you as a thought leader, and you can change the positioning in the market by doing a podcast on a certain topic. For example, let's say I stop doing what I'm doing today and start creating a podcast on cryptocurrency, NFT, blockchain technology. Okay. And if I do that for another 6 months to 12 months, then my audience are going to see me not as a podcasting expert or not as anything else, but they're going to see me as you know what, this guy is a cryptocurrency, blockchain, and NFT, expert. And that's the positioning that, that I'm going to send to the marketplace without uttering a single word, without saying that I'm an NFT expert. Because when people listen to me on my podcast talking about NFT and, all these things, then they are going to like, oh, he knows a lot, right? So they will see me as an expert. So that will, now I'm sure there are so many people who want to change that, positioning in the marketplace in another 12 to 16 months, right? So that is what a solo podcast does for you. It helps you build that, thought leadership in the marketplace, because you are sharing that knowledge. And what interview does is when you bring someone on the podcast, while your audience might see that person as an expert on the topic, right? You are facilitating that. But what it's going to do for you is it's going to open the network for you. And it's gonna, you can collaborate with that person. You can do the project together with that person. And also at the same time, you are rubbing off on someone else's credibility. Now, here's the thing. If somebody trusts Sid, and if Sid says that Bijay is a great guy, every single person is going to trust, because they know that, hey, you know what, when Sid work with people, then he makes sure that, he's working with only a certain kind of people. Then I'm, in a way, rubbing off on your credibility, and vice versa, right? So, it helps you rub off on someone else's credibility and their influence, and also on the audience, right? So when I interview Sid goes on his social media and says that, hey guys, I was interviewed on Bijay's podcast. You got to check this amazing interview Bijay did with me. Then what's going to happen? Sid's audience is going to come and say, oh, you know what? We know Sid is. He's an amazing guy, but we don't know who this guy Bijay is. We haven't heard about him. Let us check who he is. And if there are, let's say, 100,000 people who follow Sid, I'm sure there are like at least 1,000 people who are going to bother to click on that link and go and listen to it. And if they like what they heard, then they are going to be the, regular listener of the show, right? So this is what an interview-based podcast does for you. So depending on what your objective is, both of them are equally good. I would say, pick the format depending on what your objective is.
Brilliant, Bijay. So crystally, I mean, you have just crunched it down to what is the most important. So yes, value per minute is a big one. Ideal duration can vary based on the type of a show that you said. Ideally, like you said, like I like the formula, like 30 minutes per week per sitting. That's good number to keep in mind, and 5x
minutes,
time to produce. 5x time, like if you're doing a 30-minute podcast, 5x to produce that podcast.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens even for me when I do the podcast. And for me, in my case, I'm right now doing solos, and I'm doing interviews only in the video format, not in the podcast format. But both are leveraging, because now when I interview people in the Hall of Fame,
and that's a great one. I mean, thanks for bringing that up, Sid. Sorry to cut you off. And oftentimes I tell people, do a mix of it. Like if you have a knowledge to share, one week do a solo, another week interview someone, so that you are leveraging, getting benefit of both of these formats. Yeah,
absolutely. And so glad that you mentioned. Okay, so solo is good for thought leadership, and that's exactly the idea that I wanted. So I want to demonstrate myself as the expert in this space. So I did more. I started with the interview format long back, but I did not continue because I wanted to go in this. And now with this Hall of Fame interviews, and now we are doing these interviews, I'm going to launch these different segments. A combination of both is going to create that leverage. So all of you keep this in mind, and I hope all of you are taking notes. Okay. So next question is a big one, Bijay. Promotion, monetization. What are your tips on that? How does somebody actually encash the podcast?
So when we're looking at monetizing the podcast, and this is something so oftentimes people think that I'm going to start a podcast and start making money. So first off, I would say that if your primary objective of starting a podcast is to monetize, please don't do. Listen to what Sid says, about selling the course. You are going to make money, not by starting a podcast, right? So you are going to get disappointed. Having said that, does that mean that you are never going to make money on the podcast? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it requires time, and like any other form of content, right? And that's true with YouTube. That's true with blogging or any form of the content. You post a video today, you won't make, millions tomorrow on YouTube either. Or if you write that first blog and, you won't get reach, overnight either. So when you are thinking about content, you are thinking of long term. You are thinking of building your personal brand. You are thinking of building your thought leadership. You are thinking of building a community. And that is the most important thing that you should be focused on. When you start a podcast, the first thing that you need to do from the first day of starting a podcast is focus on building a community around it. Now, hey guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of my podcast. By the way, we do have a community of the people like you who seek freedom, who are part of my Telegram group, where we have conversation with each other, where we help with each other. Why don't you hop on our Telegram group so that, we can hang out, and I'm there, right? Then your listeners come in, because podcast people are listening to you on Spotify. And if you don't give them a stronger call to action, then, they're just going to go away, and, they are not going to maybe come back. But when they know that there is a thriving community of people who are learning to, create a freedom business, then they are like, okay, I'm going to go to his Telegram and see. When they come on that Telegram group, they come to your world, they come to your community, they start getting a lot of content piece from you. And also they're going to be part of the engagement and interaction that's happening. Whether I'm taking Telegram group as an example, that can be an email newsletter, that can be a Facebook group, that can be a WhatsApp group, whatever works for you. Now, bring them on the community and pay attention to what is it that they are saying. Pay attention to the problems that they are saying. Try and solve them on the podcast. And if you think that's much recurring and, problem that's much often talked about, create a product out of this. And, Sid teaches you how to create a product, right? So create a product around it, build a product around it, and then say that, hey guys, I see that a lot of you are facing challenge with this. I think you want to check my book. Or maybe you want to check my course, or maybe you want to get on a one-on-one coaching with me. And, if you are my listener, just use the coupon code listener. When you are signing up for this, you get 25% off, because I love my listeners so much, right? And just get them, and then, ask them to get into your funnel, right? So that is the best way to monetize the podcast, which is offering your own product and service. Why? Because if you have your own product and service, you can start selling it, even if you have 100 people listening to you, even if you have 20 people listening to your podcast, right? So you can start doing that. But if you want to go for the other route, like, hey, I'm going to find advertiser or sponsor and stuff like that, then, you need to have a very, you need to have a sizable audience. Like at least you need to have 10,000 people listening to a podcast before it even makes sense for any brand to sort of put money on your podcast, right? So, I mean, it's always and that's one. And this is what I say, making money from your podcast, where you are directly making podcast from your podcast. And I look at it the other way as well, which is you make money because of your podcast. Now, what that means is you didn't make directly money because of that podcast, but you made money because podcasting did something for you. Now, the example of that would be, because you did a podcast, you met someone and you collaborated something together, and then you made money out of it, right? So I'll take I'll take an example of this. And it could even be investment, right? So I'll tell you the story of how I went about starting the startup that I run today. I interviewed, a person, and he was investor and mentor to a lot of startups. And I sat on a conversation. We had this interview, and after that, we went for coffee, and we're just casually talking about life. And he was like, "Hey, what are you up to? What are you doing?" And I said, "Hey, you know what? I've been thinking of this startup idea, and this is something that I've already done, and this is where I want to take this. This is my vision, blah blah blah." So the crux of that 45-minute conversation is he asked me a bunch of questions, and he said, like, "Hey, you know what you're doing is really interesting. I think, this is something that I've been thinking for a while. Would you be open if I come on board as your mentor and give you seed fund to fund this idea?" I'm like, "Wait, are you saying that you're going to give me money for the idea that is shared?" He said, "Yeah, that's what I just spent." And I'm like, and that's how, me and my co-founder, we started the company that I run today, right? And
nice.
Now, if you think about this, it's not the money that I made from podcast, but it's because I had a podcast, it opened that door of collaboration, right? So, and there are so many such examples, right? So I'm sure a lot of people know Rajiv here. I invited Rajiv on my podcast, and then later on, Rajiv, invited me to speak at one of his events, right? So he did an event called Communicon, and he invited me to speak here. Later on, he invited me to speak to his, community, Game Changer community, and also, and eventually Rajiv is like, "Hey, Bijay, you are doing this amazing stuff. We are looking at doing our show as well. Like, hey, take my money, teach us how," right? So, now he converts into client as well. So the whole point is, when I reached out to Rajiv saying that I want to interview you, I didn't think that, hey, you know what, I'm going to interview him and I'm going to convert him into, that was not the intention. The intention was to just learn and, build the relationship, and it's a natural progression. But you can argue that, hey, but that's not the money that you made from podcast, but it happened because of the podcast. So, it's, if you think that, hey, I'm going to make money because of my podcast, then you are thinking long-term, and that's a smart strategy.
Smart. That's amazing, Bijay. Thank you for detailing it out. And I look at it like farming, right? Podcast is like you're planting the seeds of value, and farming, you're not going to get that plant. There's a nurturing period. It's going to grow, and what kind of fruits it bears will differ, from time to time, and the kind of networks that you're building. So beautiful example. I think it's all over the farming mindset, not hunting mindset. You'll actually make it work. Amazing. So next question.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that analogy from you next time.
Please use that. I use that all the time. If you're because hunter is like, they want to kill and get it right now, instant gratification. Yes, they can get it, but it's not going to be sustainable. And in a farmer, when they harvest, they're going to have so much more than they can handle because of that nurturing period. So thank you. Tools. What tools do you recommend for podcasters who are starting off? And what tools do you recommend for people who want to go to the next level? Like, say in my case, I'm doing a lot of podcasts. I think I'm touching around 100 episodes right now. So what would be the recommendation for me versus somebody who's starting? Like, you can just share.
So somebody who's starting, and again, there are two types of people, right? So one is like, hey, I just want to test this medium out. Okay. So for that, you don't have to spend anything. Just download this app, Anchor, on your phone, and just record and see where it goes from there. But if you are serious about doing this, then there's no point just putting your time, efforts, and energy in creating something where you yourself are saying that I'm just going to put it out there, because you are saying that I'm going to be on the top of that pyramid where there are 2 million podcasts, but you're not
Yes.
thinking of, I'm going to be on that 36% or maybe 20% people who are consistently doing it, right? So if you are, if you just want to start, test it out and see how the medium works and stuff like that, gain some experience of doing it. But if you are serious, like, hey, you know what, I want to just put my time, efforts, and energy because I've understood enough. Now I'm serious about this. Then, you want to, the basic thing that you want to do, even though I have been doing it for 4 years now, thousands of people have learned from me and stuff like that. I have a very simple, setup. See, I'm a, guy of simplicity. I just don't want to create like, the fancy stuff and say that, hey, you know what, get your house all, noise canceled and start a home studio to do all of that. You don't need to do that. All I have is literally what you see on the screen right now when it comes to podcasting, right? I have this microphone and it's connected to my laptop using a USB cable. That's it. And, you can record interviews literally on Zoom the way we are doing it, and just take the audio and then boom, that's pretty much it, right? You don't need any fancy thing. You don't need to get scared because this is the simplest medium to exist, right? Just connect the microphone to your laptop and boom, you are good to go.
Got it. So yeah, even I tell my students, keep it as simple as possible. In fact, now with crisp.io, just connect your whatever headset, it'll come out nicely.
True.
You can it'll do the noise cancellation.
Yeah.
So apart from that, any publishing, there's Anchor, there's Buzzsprout. Like, do you recommend going through those platforms, or do you recommend going manual? Like, what is your thought on that?
So my recommendation, so one thing is like, what Anchor does is you record and hit publish and you don't have to do anything. Anchor does it for you. It distributes your podcast to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all these different platforms on its own. You don't have to break a sweat. And when you go with platforms like, Buzzsprout, where you upload your file, and then they will give you a link called RSS feed. You copy that link, and then you go to Apple Podcast, you create an account on Apple Podcast, and then you submit that RSS feed, and then, publish it on Apple. This is a manual way of doing things. And I always recommend doing manual, and I'll tell you why. When you distribute your podcast just from Anchor and hit that publish button, while you will get the number of people listening to your podcast on Anchor. So, Anchor will have the data of like, hey, how many people listen to my podcast on Apple Podcast, this many people listen to it on Spotify and so on and so forth. But you won't get the detailed analytics. For that, you need to go to Apple's dashboard. For instance, what do I mean by detailed analytics is, if I did 10-minute long episode, what percent of people actually listen to the entire conversation of it? What's the completion rate? So that you can get a lot of insight. Like if I've done 10 episodes and certain type of topics are getting more completion rate as compared to other topics, in certain type of episodes are getting less completion rate, then I'm not going to do more of those, but I'm going to do more of the episodes which has the higher completion rate. You will get the gender distribution data, you will get the demographics data, and all of this you will get for that specific platform. Like, what is the gender distribution on Apple Podcast? What is the completion rate on Spotify? How many people are listening on Ghana? And those details you will only get on these different platforms. So I always recommend you do that so that you can get the access to the dashboard on each of these platforms.
Totally with you on that. Even though I'm using Buzzsprout right now, but I know that manual process is so helpful. So every time there's a new platform, I go create that account and then get it listed there. And there's a listing process also, approval process. So better insights.
I mean, go for something like Buzzsprout.
Excellent.
I recommend Buzzsprout.
So what do you use, Bijay? Just curious to know. Do you use Buzzsprout or do you have your own system?
So I will say, so I started in 2017, right? And that time I started off with, a platform called Libsyn. Because, when I did the research back in the day, and I'm not sure like if Buzzsprout existed or it was maybe a pretty new platform back then. But Libsyn was something that started back in 2004 or 2005. They're one of the oldest media hosting platforms and stuff like that. So, and honestly, I'm there today. It's not because like, if I was starting today, then I won't definitely go with Libsyn. I mean, that's amazing platform. Those guys are amazing. They're very supportive of the podcasting ecosystem and all. But, number one, it's a bit expensive platform. And because now you get, I think $12, you pay $12 on Buzzsprout and you are, sorted for a month, right? So I pay $20 every single month on Libsyn, and still, there is certain restriction on how much I can upload and all of that. So and also the reason that I'm not migrating from one platform to another is because every single episode I create new posts on my website. So there are more than 100 posts on my website. and each of them have the Libsyn embed, player embedded on it. The moment I move out of it, then I have to go and manually edit all of that. So because of that task, I'm continuing with Libsyn, but you guys are not missing anything because I love Buzzsprout. Podbean is the another one. These are the two of my favorite platforms. Buzzsprout. So I would say Podbean and then Buzzsprout, but Podbean recently had some issues with accepting payments from India and stuff like that. Then I started recommending Buzzsprout. So yeah.
Fantastic. I love Buzzsprout. I think it's great.
It's
and
great,
one more question I have is more from a ranking perspective. Like, is it better to embed? This is more like a technical thing. Like for podcasters are already launching it. So is it better to put the Buzzsprout player on my blog and send people to that Buzzsprout player, or you embed a Spotify or an Apple player? Embed that and send the traffic to that. What is your suggestion?
That's a better one. Like if you want to rank on Apple and Spotify, embedding the Spotify and Apple player, either of those, depending on where you want to rank, right? So that is always a better strategy because you are sending audience to that platform, and when you are sending audience to that platform, they love it, right? So because you are giving them, at the end of the day, you are giving them new listeners. Sid just does this 10, 12, 15-minute podcast a week. And after that, people are like, now they are on Spotify. Now they are got introduced to the idea of podcast. They're like, okay, I'm done with Sid. Now Sid's podcast for this week. He's going to come with the next episode next week, but I have all this time. What is it that I'm going to do? And they're going to explore other podcasts, and, the platform love that.
Got it.
So that's why, if you embed Spotify or Apple podcast, it will help.
That's
you
better. And in India now, you see Spotify is growing bigger than Apple, or like what is it like? I'm seeing like Joe Rogan is Spotify bought him, and where do you see things moving like in platform wise?
Okay, so I'll tell you this. Okay, 2017 when I started, my journey, Apple used to be the number one platform in India.
Yes,
and that told me something. What are the kind of people who have Apple iPhone? These are the certain type of people, a bit elite class audience,
correct,
right? So that's the audience, and most of this audience came from Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, Hyderabad, right? So these are the, Delhi, Bangalore, and Mumbai. These were the top three cities, for the first 2017-18 kind of a phase. And it's also because the people with iPhone and elite class, these are the people who are a bit more aware of what's going on the world, right? So they are the first to adapt anything, right? That's why we started seeing that. And then eventually we started seeing, once Spotify, entered, then we started seeing the number, a bit of a Spotify as well. But again, if you think about this, the Spotify demographics is also the same. Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai. It's again, it's such a cool thing to have a Spotify playlist. You won't hear anyone say, like, hey, have you listened to my Ghana playlist? Nobody says that. But, having a Spotify playlist is a cool thing. And it's because they are looking at tapping into this Gen Z audience, 18 to 24. That's the audience that, Spotify is targeting. And globally, they are looking at targeting this very young, cool audience segment, right? Now, to put things into perspective today, in India, Ghana, JioSaavn, these are the platforms that are way ahead of any of these Apple or Apple Podcast or Spotify, and I'll tell you why. In India, there are, last time Spotify released the number, there are 3 million downloads of Spotify in India. That's just 3 million downloads, and there are almost 110 million people who have Ghana on their phone. There are almost 70 to 80 million people who have JioSaavn on their phone. There are almost 25 to 30 million, I can't recollect the actual number, but it's on that. That's the difference. Like compare that 3 million of Spotify, like even every single person on Spotify listen to your podcast, then that's 3 million, which is like almost 2 to 3% of Ghana's audience, which is 100 million, 125 million, right? So that's why, like, now we have started seeing people listening to podcasts from Lucknow, people listening to it from Indore, people listening to it from Jalandhar, all these different cities, because the reach, because of this platform. So I would say, those are the platforms where, we have started seeing a lot of audience. And we also, it's not for one show, right? Because, at Wine Studio, we have a lot of shows, I think 15, 20 different shows. And we have started seeing this trend recently where a lot of people are now listening to podcasts. And Ghana is gradually moving up on the ladder, and becoming one of the top platforms where people are consuming podcasts on, because it's reaching the wider audience.
Amazing. Very interesting perspective. So it started off with the classes, now it's moving to the masses, because that's the how it's moving.
Yeah.
And I think the demographic of the audience on each of these platforms will also be different. So depending
Yes,
on who is your,
absolutely different.
depending on what your positioning is, you can decide like where you want to
Where
be
you want to
more.
focus and send more audience to.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
amazing. Thank you, Bijay. I think this is a power-packed interview. I think all of you here watching, whether you're watching or listening to this, wherever, just share your comments below, thanking Bijay for sharing these amazing insights. Thank him, and also share your comments below in terms of what you learned. What were your top key learnings? You could win a free copy of my book, You Can Coach, where my teams are looking, and we'll probably send you one if we are able to see some amazing comments below here. Okay. So thank you so much once again, Bijay. Looking forward to doing more of this in the future.
Absolutely.
And yeah, let's just stay in touch, and probably I'll bring you on once more after a few months as things are evolving in the industry. I know who to reach out to if we need to be in the cutting edge of this game.
Yeah,
So thank you so
absolutely.
much, and wish you all the best.
Thanks, Sid. Thank you so much.